Qasim, Sulaiman, it's a pleasure to speak to you both. This is the first time you ever speak publicly about really anything related to your father or anything at all. For anyone that doesn't know, especially those outside of Pakistan, your father, former Prime Minister Imran Khan, was jailed over a year ago now. It was, I think I told you guys, I did an interview with him weeks beforehand on the day of the Russian mutiny. And it's one of the most emotional interviews I've ever done. And, you know, most Pakistanis, most of the international community view this imprisonment as just a complete political witch hunt. And it seems as part of a broader, history of military control by the Pakistani military, or political control by the Pakistani military. That's essentially dominated the country's politics for decades now. I want to start with a quote, a tweet by your mother, Jemima. In the last few weeks, there have been serious and concerning developments regarding my son's father, Imran Khan's treatment in prison. The Pakistani authorities have stopped all visits to him by his family and his lawyers. They have also postponed all court hearings. In addition to cutting off in-person visits, and in defiance of a court order, his weekly calls to his sons, Sulaiman and Qasim Khan, you guys, who are British and who live in London, were stopped on the 10th of September. We've received reports that the authorities have now turned off the lights and electricity in Imran Khan's cell, and he's no longer allowed to leave his cell at any time. The jail cook has even been sent on leave. He's now completely isolated, in solitary confinement, literally in the dark, with no contact with the outside world. His lawyers are concerned about his safety and well-being. So that was your mum a few months ago, October last year. Guys, again, pleasure to have you on the show. And my first question is this an accurate description by your mother?
Yeah, I mean, completely. We've known for a while that he's gone through periods of having no light in his cell. He's been in there for nearly 2 years, and there have been periods of, no access to the outside world, no access to doctors. We're well aware of the situation, and he's been in, prolonged solitary confinement. So, if only we were able to speak to him more. The court mandates that we speak to him once every week. We speak to him once every 2 or 3 months, if that.
I think when that tweet was put out, was actually after large protests in Pakistan about the elections and about just general suppression of democracy in Pakistan. And as a punishment, I think they really ramped up those punishments, no light in the cell, no visitors, and so on.
So I heard that and I think he mentioned it himself, and a few others have talked about it, that he's in a death cell, which is essentially not only solitary confinement, but solitary confinement that's mainly aimed at either those with a death sentence or even terrorists. He put out a message himself, I think it was mid last year. He said, quote, "I am confined in a 7 by 8 foot death cell, typically reserved for terrorists to ensure they have no contact with anyone." Can you tell me more about that cell and his conditions, and maybe also give us an idea of the last time you've spoken to your father?
What we know is that he has no access to other prisoners. He is, alone in there. He's occasionally in the pitch black for prolonged periods. There was one period where he was in there for 10 days in the pitch black, no electricity, no nothing. And I remember when I spoke to him about that, he said the first 2 days were beyond difficult, and then he was able to get into a kind of Zen-like mentality, and what ended up being 10 days, he said it could have been a year. So yeah, the situation in his cell is pretty bleak.
He is, one thing I know about your father, he is a very resilient man. You kind of touched on how he's coping with this. Can you give us an idea of how was it in the early stages when you have those calls with him, and how is it today? Is he still as strong? Is he struggling? I can't even imagine being in the dark for 10 days.
So he's definitely, that's a very accurate description. He's definitely, resilient. He's probably I would say, I'm obviously biased, but he is definitely the most resilient person that I know by a distance. Very, very mentally tough. And he sat, whenever we speak to him, he's as strong as ever. But you know, he's not the type of person to complain about the conditions that he's in. Whenever we will always ask how he is, but he'll always sort of brush off those sorts of questions. He's more interested in hearing how we are.
I know he's dealt with it in a way that, you know, is what I think is the right way of dealing with it. Is he just reads loads and loads of different parts of historical literature, religious literature, and then he does exercise. And it's his two things that he's always loved in life. So I think in a cell, you know, it suits him in a way to just be able to focus on those two things. And every time we call, you know, we only get to speak to him for about 20 minutes. And around that time, randomly, the line will cut off. So he's so focused on ensuring that he's able to spend the first 10 minutes imparting wisdom of whatever he's learnt, you know, whatever religious or life lessons he can impart on us, and then the last 10 minutes he's very focused on finding out how we are, what's our situation, how's our family, and things like that. So we don't actually get very much time to ask about how he's coping, but I know he's doing a lot of reading, that's for sure.
So your last call, did you say, was how long ago was your last call?
2 weeks ago, probably. Yeah, probably the first call we've had with him for about 2 months. But yeah, we were lucky enough to speak to him like 2 weeks ago.
How does that work? So, like, do you know in advance you're going to speak? Like, so, for example, today, do you know when you're going to speak to him next?
No, so it's really chaotic. In fact, I'm glad you asked, because we'll get a message, and it can be sometimes at about 4 a.m. On any day, and it'll suddenly say, okay, call coming at 10 a.m. So we have 6 hours, and if we're not awake through that period, then we miss it, which has happened before, and then we have to wait another 3 months before anything comes about. But usually we're able to, you know, we're quite on it with it and are able to rush whatever situation we're in. We cancel, you know, for me, I cancel any meetings, whatever it is, and instantly we jump on, and then often we're left waiting for about an hour, and then eventually the call comes through, and then we have about 20 minutes to speak. So there's no protocol. It's a complete mess.
It just feels like a torture technique. Why do you think they're doing it this way? Why are they treating the former prime minister of the country, and what I consider to be the most popular man in the country? Like, I get people all the time when I meet someone from Pakistan, a lot of times they remember me from that one interview. That interview had more impact, you know, on you know, people talking to me than any leader I've ever interviewed. Just to kind of give an idea to the world of how popular Imran Khan is in Pakistan. And again, he was the former prime minister, a very popular one. Why do you think they're treating him this way?
You hit the nail on the head. It's a technique to try and break him. He's a very, very resilient person, and I don't, you know, he's one of the hardest people possible to break. But all of these techniques, you know, shutting off the lights, leaving him in the pitch black, not allowing doctors to go and see him, making sure that all of our calls are at completely random times and that we might miss them, or whatever, not letting us have our court mandated weekly phone calls. All of this is tactics to try and break him. But he's, you know, good luck, because he's as resilient as they come mentally, and that comes down to his faith. He has strong faith in God, and also he's, you know, always had that kind of mental toughness as well. So it's all torture techniques, exactly as you say.
Another thing, wasn't he offered, because he did an essay not long ago on Time magazine, and he talked about being offered the option or a deal that included house arrest, and he rejected that deal. And I think he had demands. I think he wanted some other people related to his family or members of his political party. Maybe Sulaiman, can you give me a bit more context on that deal? And kind of him rejecting that deal is another indicator of his resilience.
So I think that's mainly to do with the fact that there are many of his supporters and his party members and family members who are in prison currently in similar conditions to him. So, and he's very, very principled, and he wouldn't, you know, on their behalf, I think that definitely would have played a part. He wouldn't want to kind of, he'd want to be aligned with them.
He's always been kind of very principled and I don't think he'd go against his principles very on a whim.
What have you guys told him? Like, I'm just imagining if I had my father or a family member in a similar position, and I'd be urging him, because you guys born in London, live in London, so you're away from Pakistani politics. And if I was in your position, I would be convincing my father to do whatever it takes just to get out of jail and just to have his freedom again. Have you guys tried to convince him of doing this?
So actually, when we were younger, when I was younger, I'd hated him being in politics. Would way rather him just do sort of cricket punditry or analysis, and live an easy life in London or out of politics. But it is genuinely his passion, and I don't think he'd feel fulfilled if he wasn't doing what he's doing. I don't think he'd be happy if he was just living a kind of easy life in London, or because I think if he wanted to be in exile, he could, but he's genuinely.
He could easily make a deal. Like he would, if from a political perspective, I'm sure they have certain demands. The easiest one is, and this is me speaking, obviously my own opinion, but him speaking in support of the military, for example, or of the opposing political party. Just one example of many of things he could do to gain back his full freedom. But I think his defiance is the reason he's in jail. And do you still, I know you said in casting the same question to you after Suleiman, but do you still try to convince him to get out of politics, or you've kind of given up on that?
No, I mean, I personally would never, I wouldn't even want to say that to him, because imagine you're his son and all he speaks to. So when we spend time with him, a lot of the time we'll be kind of whatever, when we were younger, we were playing cricket with him. Now, watching films, whatever it is, half of the time he's spent lecturing us on rule of law, justice in Pakistan, how, the reasons why he got into politics, we know them so well. And it would be just to go against everything he preaches about, to suddenly just say, okay, I'm going to give up and I'm going to live an easy life. It's just, it's not in his nature. He has a single-minded obsession to try and help the people of Pakistan, and it's in such turmoil right now, Pakistan. He's dedicated to it, and he's not going to give up.
And he's always wanted you guys to be out of politics. Is that correct?
Yeah. I think, well, if you look at the two established parties in Pakistan, there's a tradition of it's like dynastic politics. They're dominated by two different families, and so he's always wanted to. He hasn't wanted his party to follow that tradition, and yeah. So I personally don't ever want to be involved in politics in Pakistan, and I don't think he wants us to be either.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, Kasim, you're in a similar position. You don't want to be involved in you're a very successful entrepreneur as well, so you've got a life outside of politics, and kind of this implies, the answer to my next question is that why do this interview and why now?
So more than anything, we've gone through the legal routes. We've gone through every route that we thought would potentially get him out. We never thought he would be in there a fraction of how long he's been in there, and it's only getting worse. And so we've somewhat run out of those options, and now we've decided, okay, the only route is to of taking action is to come and speak publicly. And I think I appreciate you for allowing us to speak here about it. What we want is international pressure on Pakistan right now, because currently he's living in inhumane conditions. They're not giving him basic human rights. They're not really doing anywhere near enough, and what we want is global pressure.
Yeah, I think we've, like Qasim said, we've tried. We've exhausted other options, legal avenues, and it's gone very quiet. It seems in the international media, at least, it seems to have gone very quiet, and it's just. It's basically for the human rights of not only our father but other political prisoners, and restoration of proper democracy in Pakistan as well. aside from our own obvious selfish reasons.
Yeah, look, obviously, your selfish reasons. This is your own father, and look, for the international community to understand how crazy things are in Pakistan. Pakistan population. What's the population of Pakistan?
Almost 200 million, I think, maybe over
200 million.
Yeah.
Massive military power, got nuclear weapons, massive economy as well. Because a lot of people in the world don't understand how massive Pakistan is as a country and a supposed democracy. And this is kind of me speaking my opinion. I'm a big advocate of democracy and free speech. And what's happened in Pakistan, they literally banned X. X is completely banned, cracked down on protesters. The name of your father was banned from TV, radio stations, I think social media as well. Literally, no one could even say his name. I don't know how anyone could call this a democracy. And what's funny is that people would refer Qasim, they would use your name to refer to your father, Qasim Khan, as a way to defy that ban. And the allegations against your father are mind-bogglingly stupid. Like, I understand this is political targeting, but just went way above any red line one could imagine in any democracy. I mean, I've been very critical of Brazil. Brazil hasn't done near as much as what Pakistan is doing. So it's just honestly heartbreaking what your father's going through and what the country's going through. And again, this is me speaking my opinion. And I know that you're coming on this interview away from politics and talking more about your father. But I just wanted to kind of mention to anyone listening that's outside of Pakistan what is happening in that country, and how important your dad's fight is. You did talk about international pressure on Pakistan, and we've seen a bit of that late last year, and it's kind of quieted down now. I'm not sure why. I want to talk about what Richard Grenell, who's a special envoy in the Trump administration. He essentially openly called for your father's release. I think it's the end of last year, after the elections, after Trump won the elections. He said, have you had any contact with it? Sorry, my question to you first, before I read out his quote. Have you had any contact with Richard whatsoever before that quote or afterwards?
So we haven't. We're very grateful to Richard Grenell for all the support he's shown, and I've seen his tweets. But no, we haven't had any contact with him personally.
Let me read out his tweet. This is Richard on Twitter, I think it's November last year. Watch Pakistan. Their Trump-like leaders in prison on phony charges, and the people have been inspired by the US red wave. Stop the political prosecutions around the world. First, he does refer, and I've done the same when I interviewed Imran Khan, for people to relate to Imran Khan's personality. I compared him a lot to President Trump. They've gone through similar political targeting. Trump emerged victorious. Obviously, he's president now, and your father's in jail. What are your thoughts on Richard's characterization in that tweet?
I think there's definitely parallels in the kind of the lawfare and the way he's been targeted. And yeah, I understand the comparison.
What about he calls them phony charges. He also says that people have been inspired by the US red wave, and he calls it political prosecution, which you've kind of mentioned already. Would you say this is a fair characterization by Richard? And to add to that as well, what would be your message to others in the Trump administration, including Trump and Elon himself, on what they could do to help, if anything, to help your father?
So I think that's definitely a fair characterization when it comes to Pakistani politics. 100%, they're false charges, trumped up charges. Anyone who looks into it a little bit can kind of see that. In terms of a message to the Trump administration, we'd call for any government that supports free speech and proper democracy to join the call for our father's release, and especially the most powerful leader in the world.
I mean, I completely agree. I mean, what we want is just the international community to look at what's going on and hopefully take action. And who better than Trump to gain the attention of? So, we'd love to speak to Trump or try and figure out a way where he would be able to help out in some way, because at the end of the day, all we're trying to do is free our father, bring democracy in Pakistan, and just ensure he has basic human rights.
Would you be open? So if there's anyone in the world